and they are pure and they are innocent. The sacrifices brought to Yahuwah has to be pure, innocent, and perfect. That is why Yahuwah states throughout the Torah of the animal offerings that they be perfect without defect. This goes beyond the physical. And you know, their behavior is also examined as well. Not a wild goat, not a wild ram, not a wild bull, but a docile animal, behavior-wise, and not only physical-wise. Scripture makes it abundantly clear that Yahushua, the suffering Messiah, the sacrificial offering, Yahushua Messiah, was found to be without fault. He was without sin, he was without blemish, and he was presented to the people. And you know how prophetically it was also fulfilled, that on the 10th day of the month of Nisan, Yahushua made himself public, to be known, to be examined, to be brought home by the people. And he was checked thoroughly, and towards the feast of Passover, as he came into the temple, he was preaching all over Galilee, but it's only on the feast that he would come to Jerusalem. On this particular feast, he came riding on a donkey and coming into Jerusalem. And this is known to us in the Christian circle as Palm Sunday. Well, he came in, and that was the 10th of Nisan at the calendar of God at that time. And he came, and people were waving at him palm branches and saying, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. He came into the temple. He came to the temple area, and he was making himself known. As in the instruction of God in Passover, the first Passover in Egypt, when he says to take for your household, your family, a lamb, a sheep without blemish, without defect, on the 10th day of Nisan. And it was also on the 10th day of Nisan that Yahushua Messiah came into the temple. And then we know that he was examined by the people. And he was checked thoroughly. And even the governor of the place, Pontius Pilate, John 19 verse 6, as Pilate said to them, you take him and impale him, for I find no fault, no guilt in him. So he is without fault. He is the Passover lamb that was slain as a sacrifice to be offered to God, approved by Pontius Pilate, the governor of the time. He was inspected for 4 days as he was in Jerusalem, by the courts, by the temple, in order to make sure that it was pure and without blemish. And similarly, before Yahushua was slain on Passover, as the unblemished Lamb of God, he entered Jerusalem and taught in the temple for 4 days, in full view of the people and religious leaders. So he was there, in the house. He was in the household, and he was examined. He was accepted. And on twilight, on Passover, on the 14th of Nisan, he was slaughtered. He was offered. And the blood of the Lamb covers the household when God passes judgment. And now, the grain offering, the meal offering, and Leviticus chapter 2, verse 1 to 16 says, and when anyone brings a grain offering to Yahuwah, his offering is to be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil in it, and put frankincense on it, and he shall bring it to the sons of Aaron, which is the priest, and he shall take from it his hand filled with flour and oil, and with all the frankincense, and the priest shall burn it as a remembrance portion on the altar, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And the rest of the grain offering is for Aaron and his sons, most set apart of the offerings to Yahuwah by fire. So no grain offering which you bring to Yahuwah is made with leaven, for you do not burn any leaven or any honey in an offering to Yahuwah made by fire. Bring them to Yahuwah as an offering of first fruits, but they are not burned on the altar for sweet fragrance. And season with salt every offering of your grain offering, and do not allow the salt of the covenant of your Elohim to be lacking from your grain offering. With all your offering you bring salt. And if you bring a grain offering of your first fruits to Yahuwah, bring for grain offering of your first fruit green heads of grain, roasted on the fire. So this verses speaks about the mincha, which is the grain offering. This is the free will offering. Grain is a picture of people. We are in the prophetic, or in the scriptures, when they speak of grain, when they speak of harvest, it speaks of people. And as we have seen, an offering, korban, is drawing near. So when we, the grain ourselves, draw near to Elohim, we are to come as fine flour. And the presentation of flour as an offering was very labor intensive. First, the wheat had to be planted and cared for by watering and weeding before the harvest. Then the grains were then crushed and grounded into flour, and it was sifted many times before offering it to Yahweh. So the word fine flour here is solet, or peeled barley, or grain with the outer shell husk peeled away, leaving the inner head or self exposed. Just like when we harvest rice, when we peel off the husk, and what comes out is just that head, and it's all exposed. It also refers to grain that is sifted, shaken, and resifted until it is very fine or refined. So, where are these offerings prepared? At home? At the altar of Elohim? So we need to understand that these offerings are where these offerings are prepared. They are cooked, they are baked, and they are done in our dwelling places, at homes and communities. We make them and prepare them ourselves, and then bring them to the priest before Yahuwah. So these represent 3 periods in history. And the appointed seasons, or the Moedi, as we read earlier regarding the times of deliverance. In Deuteronomy 16, verse 16, it says, 3 times a year all your males appear before Yahuwah, your Elohim, in the place which he chooses, at the festival of unleavened bread, the festival of weeks, Pentecost, and the festival of booths, tabernacles. And none should appear before Yahuwah empty-handed, but each one with the gift of his hand, according to the blessing of Yahuwah your Elohim, which he has given you. So this command went beyond just silver or money. It included mincha, or grain offering from the home. It's about coming before God, Elohim, with the yakrid mikem, or the offering of you. So there were different ways of preparing this mincha. And first, as an unleavened cake, bread, in the oven as a cake or wafer. And second, prepared over the fire in the griddle, then broken in pieces. And you can see as it's broken in pieces, it represents the body of Yahushua that was broken for us. The third manner was to cook it in a pan. And we know in Isaiah 53 verse 5 says, but he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our crookedness. And the chastisement of our peace was upon him. And by his stripes we are healed. Yahushua gave up his body. We are to give up our bodies as well. Luke chapter 22 says, and taking bread, he gave thanks, he broke it, and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given to you. Do this in remembrance of me. And season with salt every offering of your grain offerings, and do not allow the salt of the covenant of your Elohim be lacking from you, from your grain offering. With all offerings you bring salt. As children of Yahuwah, we are joined to him through a covenant of salt. And we read this in Numbers 18, in 2 Chronicles 13, and Matthew 5. It's a covenant of salt. And the term covenant of salt is indicative of the everlasting nature of the covenant relationship between God's people, his children. His children of salt, for we are the salt of the world. And the Creator, Yahuwah. And it is Yahuwah's desire to be sealed with us in an eternal covenant relationship, seasoned with salt. Lasts, preserved. At the Hebrew wedding, the covenant of salt is shared between the bride and the groom in response to the covenant that they were making between each other the other held for them in eternity with Yahuwah. So there's a ceremony in the Hebrew wedding about the covenant of salt, and it's included. And salt symbolizes also hospitality. And Yahuwah's people should be the world's most hospitable people. And even when you settle dispute with your neighbor, you would invite the person into your home to share a dish of salt. That is the traditional way, in the Hebrew way. And each of you would lick your finger and dip it in the salt, and then eat the salt together. This was the symbol of friendship and the healing of the rift that you had with your neighbor. This is why the offerings we make to him are salted, to heal any innocent violation or offense we have made to Yahuwah or our fellow men. So salt is a preservative, and it prevents decay and corruption, and it is eternal, purifying, never changing, and abiding forever. And it's one, on a side note, it's one of the things that we begin now to accumulate as we come into this last days. I am buying salt as much as I could, because I know salt can preserve the food for me in the future. So I'm salting a lot of things. Right, let's go on. So salt is pure, and guess what? Germs cannot live in it. In the same way, believers also are to be pure. Salt purifies. As such, believers are called to be the salt of the earth. Matthew 5, verse 13. They purify the world by not accepting false philosophies. They purify the world because they are not doing dishonest ways of doing business, or they're not putting selfish desires. Salt added for the flavor and satisfaction of a meal. It represents how believers should add spiritual interest and hope and excitement to all for people's lives. So salt produces thirst likewise. And as a believer, we should be producing spiritual thirst in those people around us. And the qualities found in salt are the qualities found in the character and attitude of the priesthood. For we are a royal priesthood. Not only that, we are the bride of Yahushua Messiah. Matthew 5:13 says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt becomes tasteless, how shall it be seasoned? For it is no longer of any use, but to thrown out and to be trodden down by man." And also in Mark chapter 9, verse 49 and 50 says, "For everyone shall be seasoned with fire, and every offering shall be seasoned with salt. Salt is good, but if salt becomes tasteless, how shall you season it? Have salt in yourselves, and be at peace among one another. Let your word always be with favor," Colossians chapter 4, "seasoned with salt, so that you know how you ought to answer each one." So you see, lack of salt in the diet leads to an energy depletion. Actually, if you don't have salt in your bodies, you will get tired easily. 1 month without salt, according to them, a person would die, and a slow agonizing death. So you consider the spiritual analogy of this. Without salt, you die slowly and agonizingly. Salt or sodium regulates the passage of nutrients into our cells. Nutrients cannot enter your cells, and you have malnutrition and exhaustion no matter how good your diet is. If you don't have salt, those nutrients cannot enter your body. Without Yahuwah, we are spiritually starved and morally exhausted. So we are to bring salt always. Then we have the peace offering. Shalamim. And if that which he presents is a peace offering, if he is bringing it of the herd, whether male or female, he brings a perfect one before Yahuwah. And he shall lay his hands on the head of his offering, again leaning on his offering, and slaughter it at the door of the tent of meeting. And the sons of Aaron the priest shall sprinkle the blood of the altar all around. And from the peace offering he shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah, the fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is on them by the loins, and the appendage, on the liver, which he removes with the kidneys. And the sons of Aaron shall burn it on the altar upon the burnt offering, which is on the wood, which is on the fire, as an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And it says, and all the fat belongs to Yahuwah. An everlasting law throughout your generations in all your dwellings. Do not eat any fat or any blood. I guess that is one of the words that keeps sticking in mind. And the things that are of the Lord is to the Lord. And God has given us so much, and we shall give that which is of the Lord to the Lord.